wherever you are, and whatever brought you here tonight. This is your place now. You've arrived gently, quietly, at the edge of waking and sleep. Let your body soften. Let the weight of the day dissolve, like mist lifting from an early morning field. You're about to drift through time, not into battles or glory, but into the soft shadows of forgotten lives, quiet corners, hidden communities, the slow rhythm of medieval days that passed unnoticed by history's louder voices. Tonight's journey does not lead to castles or cathedrals, but to places far from the gaze of kings, places wrapped in silence, shaped by suffering, touched by faith, and softened by the passing of time. We'll begin in a leper colony, then walk beside knights who bore not just the sword, but the weight of illness. We'll wander the relic markets, sleepy crossroads of hope and holy trade. And finally, we'll slip into the cloistered stillness of a great monastery, where the world was kept at bay by stone, silence, and centuries of prayer. The stories ahead do not demand your attention. They unfold slowly, patiently, like candle smoke curling through cold stone air. And now, with the outside world fading gently behind you, let's begin. Close your eyes, if you'd like, and imagine waking up to the soft creak of wood beneath you. The rushes on the floor have gone dry and brittle, and the cool stone walls sweat faintly with morning damp. A bell rings, not far, but never near enough to be comforting. Its tone is hollow, slow, a sound that is part ritual, part warning. You rise carefully. Movement is stiff. The air is tinged with the faint odor of herbs and oil, a constant in this place, meant to purify, to cover, to protect. But you are not free either. You pull a coarse woolen robe over your shoulders. Someone has left bread at the door. No one knocks. You are in a leprosarium, a medieval leper colony. And cities, far enough to keep the healthy safe, close enough to remind them of your presence. A place designed not for healing, but for separation. These colonies, scattered across Europe from the 11th to the 14th centuries, were usually situated just beyond the walls of towns. Some feel it only in patches of skin. Others, in numbed limbs, in strange growths, in wounds that do not heal. The body forgets its borders. You are not imprisoned here. Those who can still work tend to the herbs or keep the grounds. Silence is common. The rhythm is slow. There is no return to your old life. Others are sent away by families, eager to hide shame or avoid scandal. A few come voluntarily, retreating from a harsh world into a strange sort of peace. The disease, what they called lepra or morbus gallicus, is little understood. Not all who bear the mark suffer the same. The pain, the numbness, they come and go. Some live like this for years. Others fade quickly, wrapped in quiet burial, placed in unconsecrated ground or simple parish cemeteries. A musician may wander through, playing a soft lute from a safe distance. Some houses even receive alms charity from townsfolk who believe that serving you, feeding you, caring for you, brings them closer to God. Slowly. The Mass is spoken gently, reverently. This is your one anchor to the outside world. The priest does not live here. He visits, but rarely lingers. Always with the bell. Sometimes the food is left in a hollowed stone at the edge of the grounds. You collect it after the footsteps have receded, watching the seasons turn from a place just beyond the walls of the world. Your days begin early. You walk, if you can, to the chapel. In many communities, lepers were required to carry a small wooden clapper or bell to announce their approach. It wasn't just custom, it was law, a way to remind others to step back, to keep safe. You might pass a hedge or a narrow path and see someone step away quickly, eyes cast downward. Inside the chapel, the light is dim. Candles flicker against damp stone. The air is heavy with incense. Meals are simple. Lentils, stale bread softened in broth. often served through a hatch or wooden barrier, with barely a word exchanged. The leprosarium itself may be surprisingly ordered. Cloisters. A garden, if the land is good. A dormitory, sometimes shared. You might not be alone. Many residents are not truly afflicted with leprosy. Some have skin ailments misunderstood. Isolation breeds its own intimacy. Over time, the faces become familiar. You might share stories at dusk, sitting against the walls where the sun lingers longest. And yet, there is not always despair here. Monks sometimes visit, offering counsel. The line between cursed and blessed is thin in these times. To be cast out is to be feared, but to endure it, quietly, with grace, it is seen by some as saintly. And so your days unfold, in silence, in shadow, under the faint ringing of a bell. A life shaped not by action, but by waiting. Let the desert heat of crusader camps fade behind you now. Let the clash of swords, the scent of oil and steel, drift away like distant thunder. We return to Europe. The world here is quieter, grayer. Fog hangs over damp stone villages. A church bell echoes faintly through a sleepy valley. And inside a modest chapel, lit by flickering candles and smelling of incense and mossy wood, lies a bone. Or perhaps a fragment of a bone. Just a sliver, sealed in a silver reliquary, shaped like a miniature arm. Or a tiny toe. This, it is said, belonged to a saint, or at least, someone very holy. And around this sliver, this sacred trace of the past, an entire world begins to stir. Investments. Your purse is light. You arrive at a shrine exhausted. And there, before you, behind a grate or pane of clouded glass, rests the reason for your journey. Status symbols. Pilgrimage bait. And occasionally, well, business opportunities. Relics in the Middle Ages were not merely spiritual symbols. They were destinations. Imagine yourself as a medieval pilgrim, each part enshrined in gold, crystal, or ivory. A bit of skull here, a knuckle joint there. More than one cathedral claimed to have the same saint's head, or his right hand, or his heart. But the faithful kept coming. You've walked for weeks. Your feet are raw. A bone, or a tooth, perhaps a vial said to contain a saint's blood, miraculously still liquid, a feather from St. Michael's wing, a stone that bore the Virgin's footprint. These bones, whether truly belonging to saints or not, offered a connection to an older world, a quieter one, a sacred rhythm beneath the noise of war and weather, the crown of thorns, and the Virgin Mary's hair. The monks say it liquefies each spring. You listen, you nod, a faded label, a heavy silence. You kneel, its fame growing. You leave a coin. Multiply that by thousands of pilgrims each year. Now imagine the abbey that holds the relic, its roof repaired, its monks fed, and here, quietly, a kind of sleepy economy unfolds. Relics were collected and exchanged, sometimes reverently, sometimes dubiously. Entire bones were split into smaller pieces, of lives that lingered, even in fragments. In some cases, multiple churches claimed the same relic, but in the journeys they inspired, the faith they fed, and the quiet spaces they sanctified. Charlemagne's own collection of relics, by the 9th century, was said to include fragments of the true cross. Relic dealers emerged, some traveling, others cloistered, who facilitated these exchanges. Some were legitimate, others less so. One monk in the 11th century wrote, dryly, that there were more pieces of the true cross scattered across Europe than could have come from a forest of trees. And there was something comforting in it, not just the hope of miracles, but the tangible closeness to something holy. Relics weren't just housed in towering cathedrals. Even the smallest village might have one, a thorn from Christ's crown. Often these were enshrined, not in majesty, but in simplicity, in small chapels tucked into forests. In dim corners of wind-battered monasteries, a flickering candle. And in that silence, medieval people found meaning. A pause, a place to pray, to confess, to whisper hopes, to leave burdens behind. Relics, in their sleepy stillness, carried stories that soothed more than they shocked. They whispered of perseverance, of divine attention. And so, in a way, they lived on, not only in bone and gold. Now, let us step from relics to something broader, yet just as silent. Let us walk the stone corridors of a monastery that once echoed with chant and prayer, far from battle, far from cities. Cluny Abbey, a world of bells, books, and ritual, and a life as regulated as the tides. Now breathe deeply. Let the rustle of parchment and the hush of distant chanting settle around you. We are far from the battlefields, from the leper colonies and holy relics. Here, the world is different. This is Cluny, not a town, not just a monastery, but for a time, the very heartbeat of monastic life in Europe. An enormous abbey set in the rolling hills of Burgundy, where silence was sacred and time flowed in rhythms more ancient than war or kingship. Imagine yourself waking in the dark, not to an alarm, but to the soft tolling of a bell. A low, resonant sound that stirs you gently from sleep. It is just past midnight. This is Matins, the first of 7 daily services. And it is not optional. You rise slowly in your cold stone cell. There is no fire. A simple habit of wool, undyed, coarse, and heavy. No candle unless needed. The air is damp. The stone beneath your bare feet holds the night's chill. It is meant to align. You dress not for comfort, but for uniformity. Your body with humility. In prayer. In work. In contemplation. Your life with order. You join the others in the cloister walk, moving silently in single file. No one speaks. Voices are reserved for prayer and chant. You file into the choir stalls, and the music begins. Quiet study. Copying manuscripts by hand, letter by careful letter. Tending the gardens. Milling flour. A grand church, longer than any in Christendom for centuries. Cloisters of sculpted stone. A treasury of relics and carefully kept manuscripts. Brewing ale. Preparing meals. Gregorian chant. Monotone. Slow. Sacred. The same chant, echoing in the vaults. It is not meant to entertain. Align your mind with the divine. The abbey at Cluny was known across Europe for its strict adherence to the rule of Saint Benedict, a code of monastic discipline. It prescribed everything from meals to moments of silence, no distractions. And with wealth came politics, influence, expectation, pressure. Just the steady pattern of the sacred. Life here was measured in bells, then prime at sunrise. And so on, 7 times each day you are called to the chapel, a final chant. And then the cloisters would dim. After matins, you return briefly to rest, only to rise again for lauds before dawn. And in between, work. Each task is done slowly, deliberately, and always in silence, unless given permission to speak. Meals are taken in a stone hall, long and echoing. You eat modestly, vegetables, beans, sometimes fish, never meat. And as you eat, one monk reads aloud from scripture or a saint's life. Even in nourishment, the soul is not neglected. The abbey itself is vast, by medieval standards, nearly unparalleled. Cluny was no rustic retreat. It held libraries, guest houses, workshops. And yet, for all this grandeur, the life of a Cluniac monk remained one of humility and quiet devotion. You slept little, ate simply, spoke rarely. You gave up possessions, gave up ambitions, gave up the chaos of the world outside in exchange for order. The rhythm of Cluny's life was one of eternal return. The same prayers, repeated each day. The same path to the chapel. To modern minds, this might seem stifling. But for the monks, it was liberation. No decision fatigue. Of course, Cluny was not without its contradictions. As its fame grew, so did its wealth. Lands were donated. Nobles sought burial within its walls. Gold crept into its chalices. But even amid these shifts, the monks kept to their hours, kept to the rule, kept to the silence. Evening would come gently, with vespers, then Compline, a final prayer. You return to your cell. The walls are the same, the bed unchanged. The only light, the moon through a narrow slit of stone. You lie down and wait for the bell. And now, as our journey through medieval life draws to a close, let us step gently out of these cloisters, from candlelight into sleep. And now, the bells have quieted. The cloisters of Cluny fall into shadow once more. The monks have returned to their cells. The chanting has ceased. The world of the medieval monastery slips softly into the stillness of the night. We've wandered tonight through the hushed and hidden corners of the past. Not the battlefields or the courts of kings, but the quiet edges where life was slower, stranger, harder, and in many ways more deeply felt. You began as an outsider, cloaked in the bells of a leper colony, feared, isolated, yet still tethered to the rhythms of faith and human need. You stood beside those few who bore not only the cross, but a burden of disease and still chose to fight. You followed relics across dusty roads, bone fragments held in gold, carried not for power, but for comfort. And you traced the slow, sacred hours of monastic life, where the day was carved into prayer and the soul tuned to silence. These were not lives of fame, not even, in the eyes of their own time, of importance. But they were full. They were human. They were real. In many ways, these forgotten lives, marked by suffering, simplicity, and surrender, help us see our own more clearly. They remind us of how far we've come, and of how much still connects us. The longing for peace, the fear of the unknown, the comfort of ritual, the hope, even faint, for something beyond the hardship. And now, as the weight of the past settles softly like dust upon stone, you can let go. You are not in the cloister. You are not in the leprosarium. You are here in this moment, safe, warm, and still. Let the flicker of candlelight die down behind your eyes. Let the dim echo of chant fade from your thoughts. The medieval world has retreated, and there is nothing more you need to do. Only rest, only breathe, only sleep. Good night.